But this is really, in a lot of ways, a fake pipeline.
You got to remember the communities that filed actions against them that are opposed to the project are not along the right-of-way.
We'll build a strong Canada, we'll empower Canadians, and we'll protect our sovereignty because we believe in Canada.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think anybody's been able to cram that many slogans into one answer, and this is coming from me. This is coming from me.
Welcome back to Unfiltered. My name is Dan, and a huge welcome to all our new subscribers who just joined this national town hall. Now, before we dive in, make sure you jump into the comments below. Tell us which province you're watching from. This is a coast-to-coast conversation, and your voice matters. And the truth is, this story today has a twist almost nobody will see coming. Let's get into it. The first thing we need to do, take a big breath and look just what happened in Ottawa this past week, because this budget moment wasn't normal. It was messy, it was tense, and it feels like the country is holding its breath every time these folks stand up in the House of Commons. We're starting with the full exchange that set up the tone. Slogan spin and Poilievre swinging back.
It's in the best interest of the country to make sure we pass this budget. We work together. It doesn't matter what political stripe you're from. We need to work as Team Canada right now, and that's exactly what we're doing.
So there's Premier Ford jumping in, and honestly, it's almost surreal seeing him take this tone. He's trying his hardest to pull the country together into this Team Canada moment, like he's the captain in the locker room giving the halftime speech. Ontario wants stability. They want steel and lumber answers, and they want the feds to stop tripping over themselves. Then he talks about the First Minister's meeting, positive in parts, light in others, and the big one, softwood and steel. Ontario is feeling the heat, and Ford knows it. He also thanks the PM for racking up travel miles, which, well, I'll let him explain it.
I thought it was a positive meeting. We talked about the budget, which was positive. I told them we're light on the infrastructure, but I believe that's going to be coming. An announcement on steel and softwood lumber that affects Ontario in a big way. He'll be addressing that over the next week or so. So we look forward to discussing those projects. But it was good to get together. I recommended we do it more often. We do it frequently, making sure we're all speaking off the same song sheet. And we're gonna have a discussion more frequently than it's been a little while. But I want to thank the Prime Minister for traveling around the world and getting Canada out front.
Okay, so here's the thing, Canada. While Ford is clapping for Team Canada, Poilievre is basically saying Team Canada keeps getting billed every time the PM gets on a plane. That's what Poilievre explains in the House of Commons. Take a look.
What are Canadians getting for the 28 trips, 150,000 kilometers, enough to circle the world 4 times that the Prime Minister's billed back to Canadians? Well, he met with the Americans, and they doubled tariffs on our steel, aluminum, autos, and tripled them on our forestry. He met with the Chinese, who increased tariffs on our farmers and fish harvesters. He met with the Indians. They increased tariffs on Canadian peas. He met the Brits, and they're keeping their blockade on our beef. Why is it that whenever the Prime Minister gets on a plane, Canadians end up paying more tariffs abroad?
Okay, now that we've got some of the political shots out of the way, let's slow the room down for just a minute and break down something massive, which was Carney's budget 2025. It passed, but barely. This wasn't some big confident victory. This was a knife-edge survival moment. Here's how it actually went down vote by vote. For the yes side, 170, the no side, 168. 2 votes. That's it. Here's the walkthrough as to who voted for what, because this tells us exactly how fragile Carney's government really is. Of course, all the Liberals voted yes. The Speaker doesn't vote unless it's a tie. The Conservatives all no with 2 absent. The Bloc all no. NDP 5 no's, 2 weren't there. The Green Party, Elizabeth May, voting yes. 4 opposition MPs sat out. 1 Green MP voted with the Liberals. And that is literally the difference between a federal budget passing and the country heading into a snap election this Christmas. This is razor thin, and it sets up the next big question. Why did Elizabeth May vote yes when she first publicly said no? Let's go to Elizabeth May.
I heard a firm commitment to something I hadn't heard before from Mark Carney, Prime Minister, that I'd heard previously from Mark Carney, former Governor of the Bank of Canada, former Governor of the Bank of England, former Special Envoy for Climate Finance to the Secretary General of the United Nations. I heard a firm commitment we will meet our Paris targets. That requires action very soon, because the first target we're going to hit is 2030 and then 2035. Legally binding treaty commitments, and a commitment to do far more that we've heard in the budget with funding for the coming Montreal commitments to nature, to stop beating up on Mother Earth and start the process of CPR. So, against what I had expected to say to you today, I'm going to vote yes.
Did I hear that right? Did you hear it too? CPR? So the budget survives by 2 votes, and what does the Prime Minister do? He steps up and starts painting a picture of the future, and not a small one, not a modest one that sounds like he, Mark Carney, is scripting the next chapter of Canada. The phrase he uses, energy superpower, this is the moment that matters more than it seems.
An important step for our country, protecting our communities, protecting our borders, protecting our way of life, building our country, building locally, building new trade infrastructure, building as an energy superpower. It goes to your question. And Canada is blessed. We're blessed with immense natural resources, everything from hydroelectricity through to conventional oil and gas. We're part of an energy transition. We're going to help to lead it. That means Alberta, that means Quebec, that means Ontario, that means all of Canada, it means all forms of energy. And then last, and most importantly, this is about empowering Canadians. It's about helping all Canadians get ahead. As I say, protecting our way of life, protecting our transfers to Canadian, getting affordability back established through a tax cut, as well as our essential social programs, everything from the National Food Program through to health care, child care, pharmacare, dental care. All of that is in the budget.
Okay, here's where the conversation shifts a bit from numbers to culture, and honestly, the next segment hits a bit of a nerve for a lot of families in Canada. Conservative MP Jamal Javani has been making waves lately, and if you haven't seen his YouTube channel yet, it's called Restore the North. Go check it out. The link is in the description below. He's doing real community level work and calling things out as he sees them. And in this segment, he talks about the National Food Program, but not the way Ottawa expects him to.
The government put in their recent budget a commitment to fund a national school food program. Now, that probably sounds good to a lot of Canadians. So the government's helping kids get lunch because their kids going to school without food. It should frighten us that there aren't parents who can buy their own kids lunch. And we talk about what needs to change outside of government policy. It is the idea that the government shouldn't be your daddy. The government shouldn't be your mother. Right? We have families, and families should be strong enough to provide for their children. And when they're not, that should break our hearts and make us weep. It should not be used as a justification for the government to have even more influence, even more input, even more control over our lives. I wish more Canadians were offended by the idea that the government wants to buy your kids lunch.
Hey Canada, what do you think so far? Drop your province in the comments below. This town hall only works if Canadians like you speak up. Okay, now we pivot from culture to energy, and this is where the story starts to tighten. And if you remember what I said at the beginning of this episode, and the truth is this story has a twist almost nobody saw coming, hang tight because that's coming up. Danielle Smith lays out something most Canadians don't know. The negotiations aren't about one thing. They're about 2 massive intertwined projects. And she's blunt about the obstacles: emissions cap, carbon taxes, the 9 bad laws. We've heard all about them, plus investment fear.
Well, let's start there. You're still optimistic that there will be a pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast? Yeah, because our negotiation with the federal government is more than just a single project. It's actually two projects because we've been linking the Pathways project to have a lower emissions barrel going through our future pipelines with the need for a new bitumen pipeline going to Asian markets. So those two things are together. But we also know that you have to have investor confidence back in order to have the expansion in the production that is going to fill that pipeline. Because the way pipelines are normally built is that pipeline proponent would go out, they'd line up those who want to put their product on it, and then we'd be able to get private sector funding for it. Well, no one's going to expand their production if they face an emissions cap, which would force them to shut in. No one is going to expand if we have really aggressive and expensive carbon taxes that are being implemented by 2030. So these are the reasons why we have to look at the 9 bad laws that have impacted our investment climate, as well as those two projects.
Tonda McCharles earlier this week on CPAC calls this a national unity project, not just a pipeline. Think about that. We're talking about something so big it could actually shift this country's emotional center of gravity. But as she says, we're still a long way off from that.
If it all comes to fruition and there's sometime a pipeline in the future, look, that's a major economic, political, and national unity story in this country, a huge development. But I think we're very far from that point.
Okay, Canada, in the comments below, is this a unity project or just political theater? Make sure you drop your province. Now, the story starts to sharpen. Bob Fife, oh Bob, he lays out the conditions, and it's a lot. First Nations opposition, the BC government and their hesitation, the tanker ban, carbon pricing, on and on and on.
First Nations, and there's a lot of opposition to that, but nonetheless, if you want a pipeline, you're going to have to get them on board. It appears you're going to have British Columbia support of some kind for this pipeline, and in exchange, the government is expecting that Ottawa is preparing to grant an exemption to the tanker ban, but only in the area where the pipeline comes out, so where the shipment point is, not all along the BC coast. And there would be also stronger commitments on carbon pricing and carbon storage, which is called Pathways. It's a very complicated and very expensive system of taking carbon from the oil sands and putting it in storage, and that is very complicated and very expensive.
Tanker ban? Tanker ban? Did somebody say tanker ban? Let's bring in Green Party leader Elizabeth May, but this time she's coming in from a different angle. She's crystal clear about the environmental concerns around the BC North Coast, especially Haida Gwaii, which is one of the most dangerous bodies of water on this planet.
There is no chance in God's green earth that there's ever going to be an oil tanker up the BC North Coast. In case you've never heard of it, the inner waters between Haida Gwaii and the coast of Canada, the west coast of Canada, is something called the Hecate Strait. You should look it up. It's the most dangerous body of water on the Canadian coastline, according to the Government of Canada, and the fourth most dangerous body of water on Earth. It has tides and currents that are extraordinary, 10 to 30 meters. They sometimes go down so low that they expose the ocean floor. That's why there's been a tanker moratorium on our north coast since 1972. And you can't wish away the science. And you can't pretend an oil tanker isn't going to break apart and contaminate the coasts.
Canada, I think we're all starting to see a theme building here, but we could be smashing that theme here in just a second. Now let's find out how Liberal BC MPs are reinforcing this message. No project happens without Indigenous consent and provincial consent. Take a look.
There has to be Indigenous consent. There has to be consent from the provinces that are impacted. My constituents believe very, very strongly in those two principles.
I think you can see that the province and Coastal First Nations have been very clear. They've had a public binding agreement related to the potential of a Northwest pipeline, so I think that's really important to keep in mind in this.
But the government's position has been clear that the provinces have to consent and that First Nations have to consent before any project will go ahead.
Okay, let's just slow this down for just a second and talk about something I think almost nobody hears on the evening legacy news, because When people think pipeline, they think an Alberta problem. But the truth is, this is a Canada-wide economic problem. Here's what's actually at stake. Yes, Alberta alone loses $7.2 billion in government revenue every single year. Canada, the whole country, loses roughly $14 billion in total economic value. That's companies, provinces, Ottawa, everything bleeding money. And our oil, one of the cleanest barrel standards on the planet, gets discounted by as much as $40 a barrel because we're landlocked and can't reach world markets. This isn't just corporate pain. This isn't just an Alberta thing. This is schools, hospitals, roads, childcare funding across multiple provinces. When we talk about pipelines, we're talking about the literal difference between a strong Canadian dollar or a weak one. Balanced provincial budgets or cuts and deficits. Jobs staying here in Canada or drifting south. Now, stay with me, because what comes next is the moment in this episode where everything flips. Everything you've heard up until now, the budget, the Prime Minister's vision, the tariffs, the cultural tension, the economics, the tanker ban, all of it has been setting the stage for this next segment, because what you're about to hear flips the entire national narrative on its head. This is where things get, wait, what? What did he just say? Now let's get into the next clips, but before we do that, just a bit of a lesson. Honestly, this is something most people I don't think have ever really heard. APTN, the Aboriginal People's Television Network. It's the first national Indigenous broadcaster in the world. Not just in Canada, in the world. It launched back in 1999 with one purpose: to put First Nations, Inuit, Métis voices on their own network, telling their stories in their language without being filtered through Ottawa or mainstream television. APTN is run by Indigenous people, for Indigenous people, the producers, the journalists, the decision makers. It's all coming from within their community themselves. So when APTN covers something like pipelines, land rights, or economic partnerships, it isn't outside commentary. It's literal Indigenous leadership speaking directly to Canadians without a middleman.
Well, our organization was actually conceived from the Northern Gateway Project. The first board that we had were board members that were part of 31 out of 40 communities along the right-of-way that started the Aboriginal Equity Partners on Northern Gateway. They were First Nation and Métis communities that agreed to become owners of the project. So we've been trying to ramp up Northern Gateway 2.0 for quite some time now, and we're glad to see the federal government and the provinces, especially Alberta, is moving forward with it.
Okay, so we've heard for over a decade that Indigenous communities were against pipelines. It's been repeated so often that people treat it like settled truth. But what if I told you the groups who filed legal action weren't even living along the route?
Remember, the communities that filed actions against them that are opposed to the project are not along the right-of-way. And the 31 out of the 40 communities that signed on are on the right-of-way and have always wanted to move forward with this project, because they were scheduled to get $2 billion in benefits over 30 years, including 1/3 ownership in the pipeline. So not only did they get shareholder returns on owning the pipeline, but they'd have seats on the board to be able to manage and monitor the pipeline and make sure that all the integrity, safety systems, and environmental protection plans are properly maintained.
Whoa, that's heavy. Let that sink in for a second. The loudest opposition, not on the right-of-way. And here's where this gets even bigger. And honestly, this is the part that stopped me in my tracks when I first heard it. If the argument against a Canadian pipeline to the BC coast is tanker bans are too dangerous, then why are foreign tankers allowed up and down that coastline every single week?
In addition to the BC Premier, First Nations along the coast of British Columbia are already speaking out about the proposed project. Do you think things will be different this time around?
Well, I think that there's a lot of talk about getting rid of, the tanker ban to, because in a sense it's rather hypocritical, because there are some 250 ships sailing across the coast of Haida coming from Alaska, Asia, going to Alaska, going to Asia. And a lot of these ships are already loaded with oil and gas. So it doesn't make any sense that you would, cripple only the Canadian tankers while all of these other tankers are going by the coast.
Canada, I don't know. This could be one of the biggest untold stories in our country. Drop your province in the comments below and tell us what you think. We just went coast to coast through Budget 2025, the razor-thin survival of the government, Canada's global economic pressure, the energy superpower promise, cultural tensions, national unity, environmental fears, billions lost every year, and the truth about Indigenous ownership that almost no one in this country has ever been shown. If you want more Canadians hearing stories like this, real, unfiltered, and backed up with the receipts, make sure you subscribe and share this video. And hey, if you want to join our national town hall with our daily polls and conversations, make sure you follow us on TikTok and join the Unfiltered Facebook page. Both are linked below. And before you go, why stop here? You can get some more Unfiltered by watching this video right over here called No Pipeline, No Problem. Hope to see you there.